Present.
Councillor McAlpine. Councillor McAlpine.
Present.
Councillor Ferrier.
Present.
Councillor Howes.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Pierce.
Present.
Councillor Chambers.
Present.
Councillor Miller.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Here.
And Councillor Gatward.
Present.
Hey, there we go. Thank you. I'll move on to number 2 on the agenda, please. It's the approval of the agenda. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, it's moved by myself and second by Councillor Coleman that the County of Brant Council agenda and addendum for July 14th, 2020 be approved. And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add 3 items under item 12, other business.
All right. Do you want to say?
I apologize for 3 items, but we don't have other options to discuss these. So.
Do you want to tell me what they are now, or do you want to wait?
Well, I can give them to you. First one is Western Ontario Wardens.
Yep.
Second one, Gypsy Moss, and the third one is brush.
Brush?
Yeah. Yard waste.
Is there anything else to be added to the agenda? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I have something for other business, and it's for Cobblestone Common.
Thank you. Any other additions to the agenda? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you. I have one, Mr. Mayor. And it's regarding customer service offices.
Thank you. Any other? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor of the agenda as it's revised? Thank you. Opposed? And carried. Number 3, delegations, or I'm sorry, declaration of pecuniary interest. Are there any tonight? No. Delegations, number 4, A. We have a delegation, Jenny Butcher from the Little Brown Cow wants to speak. Hello, Jenny.
Hello.
Welcome to council.
Thank you.
You can speak freely. We're all listening.
Okay. You want us to go ahead then?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, thanks for having us talk here tonight. We feel this is something that is just so critically important to our business, to our customers, to our employees. And I got to be honest with you guys, it has taken quite a bit of bravery to stand up here, to sit here and talk to you right now, because the atmosphere we live in 2020, especially in COVID, is one of extreme cancel culture, where if you don't share the opinion of, I don't even want to say the majority, just the very loud minority, you are canceled. That's it. And they it's not fun. It's not easy. But we're here on behalf of, I can't even tell you how many people have begged us to be here to talk tonight, including our employees, and especially our employees. They have all, with big doe eyes, wished us luck. They're tonight. They're just so hoping that we have some kind of impact, because it will truly change everything about the way they go about life, and they're not, they're very scared. So we know that this is a really contentious issue. There's lots going on with it. And so in the letter that we wrote to council, as well as the what we want to talk about tonight, we're going to try really hard to keep it to how this impacts our Brant County business, and try not to get into the all the stuff that we Google now and then, and all the minutia that it seems that we're all getting caught up in it on social media. So so we'll just try and talk about a few points that are really important to us. And one of the biggest ones is that we're excited. We're glad that we're moving into phase 3. this weekend. That results in 50 to 100 people gathering. There's sound science to say that COVID is not, of course there's going to be exceptions, but it is not being spread by casual interaction with people. It's being spread by prolonged interaction, prolonged exposure to someone positive with COVID. This is very clear, and this is what they're talking about now. So now we have this strange juxtaposition where we're allowed to have parties with 100 people, a wedding, and that's prolonged exposure with, you know, people partying, drinking together, and yet the casual interaction in a grocery store, we're having mandatory masks. That's it sounds nice. The optics are great. It shows that we're all so serious, but it doesn't make any sense in our view, nor in many of our customers' views who support local Brant County businesses. The second thing that we find really important is that when you make a blanketed rule, a blanketed bylaw, I should say, you fail to recognize all the individualistic scenarios that can happen in life. And so here we are in this strange situation ourselves where the bylaw that I've read says that it applies to indoor situations. Well, we have giant overhead doors. Our store is the same climate as it is outside. And that involved a lot of sacrifice for our staff right from the start of COVID. The moment that we heard that this COVID thing was kind of a big deal, you know, like I believe it was March 15th, we opened our overhead doors and it was cold. There were days that there were blizzards outside, but we're livestock people. We know what the spread of disease looks like. We know what the spread of disease looks like with natural ventilation, and we know what it looks like indoors. And we took it very seriously, and we opened our overhead doors from the get-go. Our staff suffered. We were cold, and guess what? Now we're hot. And the health minister,
Yes, Tam?
Tam, sorry, I'm not sure her exact title. She has told people that she does not want them wearing masks outdoors. And here we are in this strange situation where, in fact, our market is outdoors, but this bylaw would light the torches for the cancel culture to say, no, it's indoors, it has a roof, right? And thou shalt wear a mask. But that's not safe for our staff. It's arguably unsafe for our customers because it's, you know, last week it was 40 degrees in our store, right? So that creates a really difficult situation, and we contest that is exactly why you don't make a blanket bylaw, because there are really specific scenarios where common sense needs to apply. And we don't feel that we will have the freedom to apply common sense to our scenario with a mandatory bylaw. Our next point is that it's just of such uber importance to us that there's a clear and measurable end date to this bylaw. And we contest that if there is a clear and measurable reason why we've started the bylaw, it should be really easy to come up with a clear and measurable end game to it as well. And you know, if I don't know if it's, you know, number of cases, you know, no cases for a week, whatever it could be. I don't profess to say I'm an expert, but if there's a specific reason we've started the bylaw, then we should know exactly how it's going to end. And I think it's quite a draconian measure to just institute it we'll end it when it seems appropriate. That's not cool for us. If we were to don masks in our store, I cannot tell you the sacrifice that would mean for our people, for our staff, and therefore making something with such frivolity is not okay with us as citizens of this county. You know, I don't need to tell you guys how many cases you have out of 150,000 people, but it's not very many. So, and it's not that we don't take it seriously. It's just life has inherent risks, and you know, we should live. The next point is that you know, we hear so often in this mask debate that it's being done to protect retail workers and store owners. I contest that. I'd like, if you want to protect people, you should ask them how you can protect them, because I can tell you that my staff would feel very, very unprotected if they were told they had to wear a mask. Puts them in a very difficult situation. And on top of that, we've been on the front lines of this pandemic since March 15th, since day one. We've taken it really seriously. It's involved huge sacrifices from every single person that works with us in every way possible, both from a spiritual level, right down to the soul, and right out to number of hours worked. It's been insane. We were one of the few businesses that extended our hours during COVID to try and help people spread out instead of contracting our hours for I don't know why. And so I really think that to us, it would feel like a slap in the face to then be told, oh, and by the way, we're going to protect you by making you unable to breathe and unable to enjoy what you do. Things that you may not understand if you don't wear a mask or don't work in retail all day is the amount of physical exertion that goes on in our store. We're slinging bushels of potatoes. What does a bushel of potatoes weigh?
Yeah, really.
50, 60, 70-pound bushels of potatoes all day long. Sweet corn started today. That's one of our that's probably one of the best days of the year to have Welch's sweet corn. And I personally slung how many bags do we sell today? 30, something like 32 bags of sweet corn that weigh 50 pounds each above my shoulder. And someone can say, well, then don't wear a mask when you do that. Well, guess what? It doesn't make sense. We're in and amongst people, and someone's going to lose their minds if there's a mandatory bylaw. I don't feel safe.
There's one more minute left of the presentation.
Oh,
I don't feel safe in any way, shape, or form having to wear a mask while working as hard as we work. We have people come in with masks. We thank them. We're glad that they're doing that. It makes more sense for them to wear it for 5 minutes than for us to wear it for 11 hours. We do work 11 hours in our store. This isn't 4 hours on, 4 hours off. This is a real life scenario. So, so you're talking about 11 hours of wearing a mask in heat, not cool. We can't hear people at all that are wearing masks. So imagine how hard we're working right now, and 11 hours of working that hard. And then the physical exertion, on top of that loss of oxygen from wearing a mask, on top of that shouting into a mask all day so that you can be heard.
And then people leaning in to hear you. Getting closer than 6 feet because of the mask.
Yeah, it is positively exhausting. People are absolutely frustrated because they can't be heard. I can't describe to you how exhausting it would be wearing a mask all day.
And the first thing they do is take the mask off so they can talk.
What we think should be important to you guys, I'm very close to the end here. What we think should be very, very important in this discussion is that we feel strongly that this will impact our sales in a big, big way. Why? because if I have to wear a mask, we get a ton of men stopping in the middle of their workday. These are the kind of people that if they have to wear a mask, they won't bother coming. So two things will happen. First, if I got to wear it, I'm going to make sure I get a big
That's
trip.
10 minutes. If you want to give a few more minutes or not?
I think we should, she's close to the finish here. I think we'd like to hear her finish. Keep going, Jenny.
So I'm going to get a big amount of stuff when I go. Typically, we have lots of people that do all their grocery shopping at our place, and we appreciate it. But typically, that's going to happen at Loblaws, Sobeys, and the big box stores. Not good for Brant County business at all. I think that it's going to end up having people shop in at fast food stores and through drive-thrus. And on top of that, if there are other counties, our neighboring counties that don't enforce mask bylaws, people will travel there. We can tell you right now, I think it's extremely relevant for everyone to know that our employees and us have sat down and we estimate that about 4 out of 5 people do not wear masks right now. I promise you that is not situation specific to our store. We have been to Lowe's, we've been to other retailers, and we've witnessed the exact same thing at other stores. If you think that there's a majority asking for this, I implore you to do a survey because they're not. We are on the front lines and we're talking to thousands and thousands of people a week and they are not asking for this. Some are, sure, but it's the vocal minority. And I think that is what I wanted to say about, yeah, and just my last point is that the people shop in ultra local businesses in a more casual way. So casual sales will go down, as I said earlier. So thank you for hearing what we have to say. It is of uber importance to us. I realize it's very easy to say, oh, it's no big deal. Just put a mask on for 5 minutes. Who's it hurting? I can tell you who it's hurting, and it's hurting our business in a big, dramatic way. And they're begging us. Our staff is begging us to talk to you guys and begging you to see that there's many, many more sides to this.
Thank you, Jenny. Are there any questions to the delegation? Does anyone want to have anything to say to Jenny? Seeing no questions, I'd like to just make a point. First of all, I thank you for what you do. You do it very well. You have a wonderful place out there. It's a real shopping experience. I think you're very professional and we're glad to have you in the county. So thank you for coming tonight, and you have been heard. And if there's no other questions, then we will release you from the Zoom penalty box there and move on with our meeting. So thank you, Jenny. Okay, there was no questions. What do you want to do with this, Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes, that the delegation regarding the face coverings in the enclosed public places be received as information and be considered as part of the 7F RPT-20-86 report.
Thank you. Everyone ready? All those in favor? It's been received. Thank you. Number 5 on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings. There are 3. Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Reid that the County of Brant Council meetings of June 16th, June 23rd, and July 7th, 2020 be approved as presented.
Any questions to the reports? Noting that one is in camera, so be careful. Councillor Gatward. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. This question is regarding the in-camera minutes, but it doesn't reveal anything it shouldn't. I am wondering if we could have the dollar amounts put in the recommendation so that looking back on this in the future, we'll remember there were several items that we dealt with, and I would like to know which one is which.
Okay, thank you.
I'm talking of RPT 2071, which was with respect to Valley Estates.
Point of order, we're not discussing in-camera stuff in an open session.
No, we're not. No,
No.
we're not. I'm just asking if the minutes could reflect dollar amounts.
Yeah,
That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Gatward. We'll make note of that and have staff send those amounts to you if you want them now, and we'll make sure that the amounts are moving forward are listed for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Seeing no other questions, call the vote. All those in favor to receive the minutes? Thank you. Number 6, is there any new business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. Go on to number 7, please. Staff reports. Councillor Chambers.
Yes, the recommendation is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Miller, I believe.
It is. Actually, Councillor Gatward, I believe.
Sorry, whoever.
It doesn't make much difference. Does anyone have any questions to the report? Councillor Miller?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, are we talking 7A, B,
Yes,
C, all of them?
We're talking 7A.
Okay, so I do have a question on that when you're ready.
All right, I'm ready right now.
Okay, in the report, it notes that property taxes are down 6.5% year over year. And I was just wondering if we had a similar metric for the water, wastewater.
Robin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Michael, and just noting that Miss Hewitt is had some preoperative work done today. She has surgery later this week, and she's really not feeling well. So I'll be Heather and I will be carrying her reports tonight. So the answer is we don't have that metric, but we can get it. So.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I'll tell you right now, I'm concerned about the 6.5%, and that's why I'm kind of concerned about the water, wastewater as well. So I look forward to getting that information. Thank you.
Councillor Pierce, you had your hand up first? No. Councillor Bell.
Oh, I'm good.
Thank you, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess through you to Michael, and it's for my education again. What does eligibility for tax sale really mean?
Michael?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to turn that over to Heather Mifflin. I think she can probably walk us through what that term means.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The Municipal Act states as to how a property becomes eligible for tax sale. So if you failed to pay your taxes for 2 years, then that's at that point that triggers your property to be eligible for tax sale, and then we start the process of registering it.
Does that make it equivalent to a lien on the property?
I'm not sure on that. Sorry.
Yeah. To Mr. Mayor, through you, I mean, I think it would be a similar situation. The logic of tax sale is that we would claim the property. It could be sold. We could recover amounts owing, and then any balance would then be refunded to the funded to the previous owner. So not unlike a construction lien in certain facets. So,
Final question: how often have we done that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've done it a few times in the last 20 years, not often. Maybe I want to say 5, not very often.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm sorry that I didn't say that I was separating everything on number 7. In my mind, I knew I was. I just forgot to say it out loud. So we're now going to vote just on 7A. All those in favor to receive? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. B.
Mr. Mayor, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Miller. Staff report RPT-20-78, Municipal Drinking Water Systems Regulatory and Drinking Water Quality Management Standards Quarterly Update be approved as presented.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the report? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor to receive? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7C, Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McAlpine that staff report RPT 20-80, automatic speed enforcement, be approved as presented.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the report? Councillor Pierce first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, a couple questions if I could. I guess first off, on page 34 of our report, at the top part of it there, it talks of there's numerous municipalities have participated in this working group that was put together. Were we one of those municipalities that participated in that, or have we just recently joined, as it states later on in the report? I just want to know if we were involved in those talks.
Michael?
Yes, through you, and as I mentioned, Robin couldn't make it tonight, so I'll have to, I don't have all the answers to this report, so I apologize ahead of time. It's my understanding we joined this working group in February, so we were in fairly quickly because this the regulation came into effect in December, and I think a lot of the working that's been going on with the municipal groups and some industry groups started after that. So I think we were in early, but we weren't on the ground, so to speak. So, but I think it's good that some groups have gotten together to sort this out collectively as opposed to independently. So.
Absolutely. Okay, that's good news on that. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, on page 37, section 6, when it talks about costs, it's got processing center cost, and it states in there that one of the costs per ticket is dependent on volume of tickets. I'm not sure if this can be answered or not with how does the cost change with volume? Like, does it go down every 10 tickets, or do we have any idea as to what the costs ratio change is with the volume?
Michael?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you, and I think at this point, this is a very rough estimate on the processing center. As the report indicates, the City of Toronto is prepared to lead processing. They're prepared to take that on. They already do that for red light cameras for most of the municipal sector. But I think that's something that's still going on. So I think the assumption is it depends on how busy they're going to be, first of all. And so my suspicion is, and that's why our recommendation is to defer this final decision to the budget, to encourage us to continue to work on it, because there are still a lot of unknowns. It is evolutionary space right now, and I just don't think we're in a position to, any municipality is in a position right now to enter into an agreement with the City of Toronto to process these tickets.
Okay, and one final one, if I could, Mr. Mayor, on page 39. When it talks about annual costs, it talks about equipment moves, and I know there's talk about the portable one, so you can move it around to the problem areas. I'm just trying to understand with that 25,000, how many moves does that entail? Is that just one move? It costs you 25,000, or do we have any indication as to how much it costs to move?
Michael?
And I'm going to sound like a broken record, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but again, we made a bunch of assumptions on this. We really don't have a good answer for this one. So the report mentions that there's quite a number of assumptions, but I think what we visualized is that it would be moving on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Okay.
We're assuming that, this is complicated equipment. It's got to be legally defensible, so that it would involve a fairly elaborate contracted setup, takedown, and reset up. So we made very conservative assumptions on this. We didn't want to bring this in, and paint a picture that this was a cheap alternative, because we're not exactly sure. We do think that there are some considerable costs to this. Notwithstanding that, there are some revenues to offset those. So.
Right. Okay, I appreciate that, and I concur with the recommendation to put it off as well. Thank you for your time.
Michael, maybe I could suggest that when Robin's feeling better, she could shoot us an email with the answers to those 3 questions.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. If there's anything that I can't answer, some of these things I don't think Robin knows either. Again, but if there's, I'll ask Robin when she's a bit better to review the discussion tonight. We can clarify this via Friday file memo. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note the Joint Processing Center, as Michael mentioned, is with the City of Toronto. And I would hope that all the municipalities within the province that have a Section 10 board with the OPP would be able to join together and have their own processing center separate from the City of Toronto. It would probably be more efficient, not so cumbersome, and cost us less, in my opinion. So that's my comment. I don't know if anyone's looking at that or how many Section 10 municipalities have thought about having automatic speed enforcement measures in their municipality. But I think it's something that should be looked at. Thank you.
And I think Councillor Gatward, back in the good old days on the Police Services Board, when you and I were on it, we talked about having a center closer than Toronto at one point. I don't know if it went anywhere, but I know that it's been brought up when you and I were members of the Police Services Board. Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, one more quick question to staff. Would it be safe to say that when the day comes that we do decide on this, one of the first steps would be to have signage on the entryways into the County of Brant that say you are entering a photo radar community, as it would achieve some of the purpose of impacting the way people drive.
Michael?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think those are things that we may want to think about in the rollout of our photo radar program, if and when it matures. I had actually the same thought that we might want to self-identify as a photo radar community to caution drivers entering the community that there are photo radar devices. So my expectation on this is, as we move forward and get a better grasp on the mechanics of the program, that we would also be looking at a public relations campaign, like we have with most of our other campaigns, and we could consider items like that and include those in the final budget number for council.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Michael. Two questions, and I have a comment, and I can happily leave the comment till later. I'm surprised that your cost analysis only has 10 tickets per day. And the reason I say that is if I look at the speed spy data, then the number of people that exceed the speed limit, and I'll give you, just as an example, Cobblestone Drive, there's a far greater number than 10 per day. So unless this machine is sleeping for a while, I think it's going to get busier than 10 tickets per day. So any thought on why that number 10 came up, Michael?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Bell. Rob and I spent a lot of time talking about the math, and again, I think we were trying to stay conservative, so we were trying to think of almost a worst case scenario, so we could paint a realistic picture for costs on this. Some things we thought about is that, well, because one of the realities of this program, the legislation that's driving this program, will require signage to be put up on the periphery of the speed zones, the ticketing impact may be lower. So, the speed spy data may not be a good predicator for us right now on what the number of tickets would be. So we did, I'll acknowledge, we did reduce that number. The second thing is we're not sure whether the provincial review is going to set some guidelines on the forgiveness space, whether the first 10 kilometers over will eventually not be enforceable. So again, we try to stay conservative conservative on our numbers, but I do acknowledge, I mean, that that those numbers could be higher, but they might be lower, given those kind of things that I thought about. So we did spend quite a bit of time thinking about what metric do we want to use to determine the number of tickets that might be logical from a camera, but I'll acknowledge it could be quite a bit higher. They also could be lower. So.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Second question was relating to the actual cost of a ticket. I looked online, saw what Toronto are charging for tickets. They're charging significantly more than we are proposing or indicating in the cost analysis. But as a more general perspective, this should not cost the county a cent. I think you're quite right. This is about safety. It shouldn't be at a cost to us, though. So whatever it costs should be reflected back in the cost of the tickets to those people that offend. So just an example, if you do 49 kilometers an hour more than the speed limit in Toronto, you're paying $718 for that ticket. It's quite a disincentive to anybody driving at that speed.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor to receive it?
Mr. Mayor, can I make my comment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I thought we were going questions and comments. I apologize.
I thought you were finished.
No, I wish I was. Going back to the speed spy data, we are now in the receipt of a lot of data, which is great. And we can actually build our go forward strategy on the basis that we actually have information that tells us people are speeding, and that speeding is getting worse. Just as an example, there are multiple cases in our speed spy data, both on Willow Street and on Cobblestone Drive, where people are in excess of 100% more than the posted speed limit. I mean, and the 85th percentile is way above the posted limit in some cases, some of these cases. I stood outside of my house here and watched one guy turn around in the road and deliberately gun his car so that he could drive the speed indicator that is posted on Willow Street up to 100 kilometers an hour. So it's those kind of people that we're trying to get with this ASE. And if I take the pulse of people in Paris, they are anxious to have it. So I would like to actually propose that we accept the third alternative. So I'd like to make a motion that we accept the third alternative that was proposed by staff rather than the second alternative. And that third alternative basically says, let's get on with it now. Recognizing there are natural delays in the system, I don't think we're actually losing any or gaining any time by saying, let's wait. I think we should get on with it now. We should understand the experience from the 180-day trial that will come in August. I can't imagine we can be ready before that time. So I want to be, my position is we should be committing ourselves now to having one mobile camera available ASAP, and that will be whether it's in the late 2020 period or the early 2021 period. I don't mind, but as soon as we can. I think we owe that to our residents, not just in Paris, but it's, if you just look at the speed spy data around the county, and you can do that. If you go online to our maps application, you can see exactly where people are speeding. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Are there any comments to Councillor Bell's suggestion to move to the third option? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I have a issue getting my mute screen to come down so I can unmute. That's why there's a delay. It's estimated to be $65,000 for each camera annually for this type of equipment. We haven't budgeted for that amount. I'm not sure where we would find that money since we're having a taxing year, no pun intended, with our finances and COVID-19 conditions impacting us. I do think that the budget will be considered in the next number of months, and I'm not sure how long it takes to order a camera or have it leased.
Mr. Mayor, point of order,
But-
do we even have a seconder for this to be talking about it?
Thank you, Councillor Pierce. Seconder is Marco Ferrier.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As a point of order, I think, don't we have to vote on my motion first before we entertain other motions?
Yeah, yours can be voted on first if you like. We can defeat yours and go on to number 3, or yours might pass.
Anyway,
Or we can consider this an amendment to Councillor House's motion that the report be received, and then amending the second clause to proceed with option number 3.
Are you finished, Councillor Gatward?
no,
All right, and continue, please.
thank you. The dollars aren't in the budget, and staff are recommending it be referred to budget, and the study will be up in August. We'll have time to get organized and investigate vendors that can supply the equipment and the best way to move forward on this. So rushing into something right now may seem like a good idea. However, as much as I want to stop speeding in the county, and I'm sure we all do, I believe that the staff recommendation is the best option number. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Councillor Ferrier. Mark, are you?
Yes, I am. I'm speaking to this. I wanted to second it more just to continue the discussion. I actually agree with Councillor Gatward, though. I just worry about the piecemeal nature of it. If we buy something now, are we then committed to buying pieces that don't quite work and the rest of it? So I'd rather do this as one larger initiative, especially because we're such a large county. And I know it's appealing to, hey, Councillor Bell talking about Willow Street. I live on Willow Street. He lives on Willow Street. It'd be wonderful to have a ticketing camera on Willow Street right now. But by that same token, I think that it wouldn't be fair to the rest of the county, and we'd be spending a lot of time trying to figure out where that one camera would go. And I don't think we can just get a single camera. I think we need to have some equity across the entire county to make sure it gets where it needs to go. And we do this very smartly, and we do it once. And if we have to, the economy of the scale will also chip in there too. So just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to this? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just want to say I admire Councillor Bell's gung-ho on getting the project going. But if we adopt the budget timeline later on this evening, we'll be seeing the preliminary budget in 4 months in November. So, and in the report, which, by the way, I thought Robin did a great job, she said we'll have a lot more information about costs and all that stuff. So I'm prepared to refer it to budget, and I'll leave it at that.
Are there any other questions? So I think what we'll do then, since there are no other questions, is we're going to vote on the original resolution from Councillor House. Before, and if it gets defeated, we'll move on. But if not, we'll leave it there. So I'd like to vote on the original.
Mayor Bailey, we do have the amendment on the floor. Are we going to deal with the amendment first?
I don't think we need to. I
believe you do if you have a mover and a seconder.
We don't have a seconder yet.
Councillor Ferrier seconded.
Oh, all right. So do we want to defeat that first then? Do we want to vote on that first, or?
Can we read the amendment if you don't mind, just so we're all clear on what we're voting for or against?
Councillor House, yeah.
My original motion was to support the staff report and including the recommendation as presented.
Okay.
So
Heather, can you read it please with the amendment?
Yep. The motion on the table is that the recommendation for RPT 20-80 be amended to instruct staff to proceed with the process of implementation as soon as feasible in 2021.
Everyone's clear what they're voting on? All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not clear on what I'm voting on. Are we voting on the amendment first and then the main
Yes.
motion?
Yes.
Okay.
So all those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Okay, so it's defeated. So we're back to the original. Councillor House, want to repeat it again, please?
Sure, it was moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McAlpine that staff report RPT 20-80 in reference to automatic speed enforcement be approved as presented.
Everyone's clear on what they're voting on? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Miller, quit smiling. Number 7D.
It's moved by myself, second by Councillor McAlpine, the Community Improvement Plan application STG 20-01 be approved as written.
Are there any questions? Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More of a comment, so if there's questions, I'll let them go first.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, comments are now. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I think this is fantastic that we continue to see people using these grants. This was something that was supported by council wholeheartedly, and there's been quite a few people take it. I don't want to say take advantage of it, but use what is available to them. I'll put it in that way. And in the report, I just want it noted here that in the report, there still are funds available there. So everybody needs to understand that there still is money available in this fund to assist you with renovations and such that obviously there has to meet stipulations, but renovations and such that you want to do to your businesses. So I just wanted to just make sure everybody knew that.
Everyone's clear on that? Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 7E. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chambers that RPT 20-84, enhancing the COVID-19 temporary patio allowance program, temporary zoning bylaw amendment, be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Are there any questions? Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, with the decision coming down yesterday regarding moving to stage 3 and allowing these establishments and such to be open, do we still need to do this?
Michael?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I mean, it is a good point, and certainly we didn't know what stage 3 was going to look like on Friday when we assembled this. I would suggest, maybe I'll ask Pam for some further thoughts on this, but this can't hurt. Some restaurants may still want to continue with their patios, so I don't think there's any damage in approving this. But I would, Your Worship, with your approval, I would put it over to Pam to see if she has any further thoughts.
Thank you, Pam.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Bailey. I think that Michael is quite correct. It does give the county some more flexibility. It is a safety precaution to have it in place. The council will also note that in August we'll have part of our final bylaw update, a more long-term solution for events and patios that could happen in the future, such as this. So, yes, appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Fair.
Yes, just wondering if this resolution, if it would remain in place if we have to go back to phase 2, which is a possibility that we have to be honest about.
Pam?
I can answer that. The bylaw, I think, speaks to an end time of October 19th. So there is a deadline for that. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Laferriere, sorry for you, Your Worship. that it provides that flexibility in case there are some rollbacks to the measures that have been eased at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Gatward? Carried. Thank you. F, please. Councillor Bell.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Ferrier, that staff report RPT-20-86, face coverings in enclosed public spaces, be approved as presented.
Okay, before we go any further on that, I think Michael wants to speak to a correction before we go any further.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to bring to Council's attention a correction that needs to be made to the actual bylaw. In the package, it would be page 64 of the actual bylaw. It is section 3 of the bylaw, subsection B. It should read a child between the ages of 2 and 5. So that was an error in the bylaw, and I would propose that it would be corrected in the final. If council approves and this moves on to bylaws this evening, that the clerk would be correcting that for the signatory copy. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. So 3 goes to 2, 2 to 5 for the ages for the children. Okay, questions, please. Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I do support this recommendation. I had a question for our economic development staff. I think one of the hurdles that people imagine in understanding this temporary new way of living is how retail store owners can direct their staff to on how to deal with educating people that masks are necessary, and my presumption is that our economic development and communication staff will do their usual terrific job at assisting business owners with signage and instructions and how to politely reinforce this message. I'm just wondering if we could have staff speak to that a little bit to reassure some concerns. Thank you.
Michael, who do we have here to speak to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, Allison, maybe her staff are going to take the lead on communications. I can turn it over to her, and then I can follow up if required.
Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, the communication staff has prepared, as the report notes, that there is a robust public relations campaign that will be associated should the report pass and be adopted by council. There are 2 staff prepared and ready to work with businesses over the implementation period, again, if it's passed, to both distribute posters and support the businesses and help them through a transition phase should they have to implement this in their stores. And again, walk them through the bylaw. I think some people have noted the media coverage, but not necessarily the specifics of the bylaw. So we do have 2 staff that will be working with them should this be approved to support them through the transition.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Your Worship, if I could maybe just add to that. So over the course of the last 4 months, we've been dealing with a number of provincial directives, and I think here at the county we've done a fairly good job of being receptive to businesses that have concerns. So just a few things that we do, as Allison mentioned, we have staff assigned to this. We have a standing weekly meeting where a group of us get together and discuss any anomalies or concerns that we're struggling to resolve. And we try to group think around. Mayor Bailey, you would confirm that sometimes I reach out to you and you and I confer on these things. So I think we are quite prepared to help businesses through this. I think we've done a good job so far. This is just another of the directives that have come forward through this pandemic situation, and I think we do have a pretty good system here that we've been following, and we'll continue to use that system. It's worked quite well so far. So,
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I have some questions and comments on this proposed bylaw. First of all,
let's do questions first, Councillor Gatward.
okay, the report speaks to the County of Brant and the City of Brantford. It's my understanding that this Emergency Operations Committee was not only composed of those two, but also the Six Nations of the Grand River. Yet they're not mentioned as bringing this bylaw before their council. And I would like to know if they are doing the same as us or not. Because as we know, their members of their community come to the county and the city for work, for shopping, and are they going to practice this same proposed mandatory mask in their area?
Michael.
Because
Michael?
Thank you. Your worship, through you, I can't speak for Six Nations of the Grand River. What I can say is that they are sitting in our unified EOC advisory committee. They do, however, have a separate health unit jurisdiction, and it's my understanding that they also fall under a fairly different what I would call legislative regime. They are not a municipality. They are First Nation. They fall under federal jurisdiction. So the last we spoke with them, which would be last Wednesday, when this was discussed at the Unified EOC, they said they were looking into face masks. I don't want to put words in their representatives' mouths, but they were looking into the process that they may have to follow, which would likely be different than the process we're following. Because we I laid out the three processes that we could follow in my report, which are all provincial processes. There's a health unit process, there's an emergency using the emergency declaration process, and there's a municipal bylaw. None of those processes, it's my understanding, would apply to a First Nation. So that's probably all I can say on that. Other than they did say that they're investigating this in their community, and I may hear more about that tomorrow at our Unified EOC meeting. We're meeting on a weekly basis right now. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Gatward.
thank you for that answer. May I comment now, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, sure.
Well, I'm not going to support the recommendation. I think we've gone 4 months already, and if we were going to implement masks, we should have done it right near the beginning of this pandemic. I think that we've asked people to stay home. We've imposed various rules and regulations, and in Brantford Brant, we've been fairly good about obeying the rules.
It's 7 o'clock.
There is some issues with social distancing. Some people probably will never obey the rules. However, the province has taken it upon themselves not to make masks mandatory throughout the whole province. The Ontario Ministry of Health has not said masks should be mandatory, nor has the World Health Organization said masks should be mandatory. So I don't think that Brant County should say masks should be mandatory. And it's not a municipal government's place to do that, in my opinion. And I believe that the majority of the residents in my ward that I represent, Ward 5, being a rural area, would not be in favor of this recommendation of making masks mandatory. I'm not anti-mask. I wear a mask when I go to the grocery store. I went to the windmill today. I wore a mask. I probably don't put it on correctly. We haven't instructed the public how to wear masks correctly. or that they're only to be used once if they're disposable masks. There's so many things that aren't within our bailiwick to implement a mandatory mask bylaw. And what if this bylaw is challenged? How much are we willing to spend on court costs to defend it? If it was so important to the health unit that we should have mandatory masks, why did not the acting medical officer of health issue an order for the city and county to all wear face masks? So that's my comment, and I won't support the recommendation as I don't believe the majority of the people in the county do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we in the time for comments? I don't have a question. If it's just questions, I'll wait.
I think there's probably only comments at this point. So
no.
We have a question. First of all, Councillor Bell.
Mine.
Can't hear you. All right.
Mine is a comment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pierce has a question then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. If we go to page 222, hang on one, sorry. Apologize here because I have a few comments as well, but I did have a couple questions. Okay, so on page 55, I guess I have a comment about it, but I have a question first. When it talks upon about the receipt of confirmation from the local medical officer of health that this face covering bylaw is no longer required, is that like who would it be? Just strictly her or them that would be making that decision? Where would that come from? Would that come from higher in the province, or is that just locally?
Mr. Bradley.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what my proposal on how do we make sure that this bylaw just doesn't stay into effect for forever? My proposal was, again, we reacted. Your EOC reacted to this based on a request we received from the medical officer of health, the local medical officer of health, who is the lead agency on our area's response to COVID-19. And our EOC looks towards that lead agency to direct us through this. So on that notion, then I propose that I would be checking in with her, or if somebody else moves into that role on a at least monthly basis. But right now we're meeting weekly through our unified EOC group and the medical officer of health as part of that. So I would think likely we'll be talking weekly about it and waiting for the medical officer of health to provide us with guidance that the mask bylaw isn't required anymore. And we would leave it, again, as they've advised us through so many things over the course of this process, leave it to them to determine what would influence that decision. We may be providing feedback to her or a replacement on feedback we're receiving from our public, but we would be looking towards the chief medical officer of health to say, we don't think this is required anymore. Now it's my understanding that and the health unit members may be able to speak to this, that the medical officers of health in Ontario speak regularly as a group, and they do take a lot of their guidance from the chief medical officer of health in Ontario. So I would suggest that by seeking the guidance of our local medical officer of health, we would be engaging a larger group of experts in the field of disease prevention. So hopefully that answers.
It does. So just to confirm, there's no way that we could put an end date to this until such time as we get the okay from the medical officer of health that they now feel it's okay to end the mask.
Michael?
Your Worship, through you, that has been my proposal, and I would say that some of the bylaws that are being enacted here in Ontario do have end dates. I think it was my suggestion in discussion with my colleague at the city, as well as the chief medical officer of health last week, that putting an arbitrary date on something we don't know when it needs to end didn't seem intelligent to us. It seemed more intelligent to be validating the need to continue it, to put it in place, and then regularly validate the need for the bylaw to continue, as opposed to putting a hard, arbitrary time time expiration on it. So, but if council wanted to alter that, put a hard date on it, they could do that. So.
Okay, can I comment to that one, Mr. Mayor, and then take other comments and come back, or?
Let's start with Councillor Laferriere first, and we'll come back for your comments.
Okay.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess through you to the committee as a whole. I just want to speak to a couple of things here, and I have them written down, so hopefully you can humor me. It's unfortunate it won't be a unanimous vote. I think that kind of leadership does help with the legitimacy of something like this, but that's okay. I won't cancel anybody, I promise. But what I like about this is that it's a living document. It's something that we can amend as needed. On the piece about the province leaving it up to us, that's what's happened. It's not that it's not our business. The province decreed that they weren't going to make a decision for the entire province, but they left that power up to the municipalities. And sometimes they overrule us and they make decisions above us. And sometimes they say, you know what, this should be decided on a municipality by municipality basis. So completely legitimate in terms of that process. There are exemptions from my reading of this, exemptions like physical exertion, workplaces that have that. So the piece with the farm that we heard from today. I've spoken to 2 other farms that are markets, and they are doing mandatory masks for their employees. They haven't seen a decline in business. I think it's important to note. The kids under 5 will have exemptions to some degree. Dining is an exemption. Religious rights are an exemption, including pastors who might need to be heard from a social distance. People with medical and mental health issues are also an exemption. Most of the business owners and associations that we've received correspondence with, have been in favor of, despite the claim that most people in the county or most businesses would be against. That's not what we've seen in terms of the letters we've received. A number of the letters said that the reasoning to not support was that we've had 0 or 2 cases at the time of writing. Now we're at 11 as of today. Who knows what tomorrow will be? Estimates for a region our size say the likelihood of every known case is that there are 16 unknown cases in a municipality of our size. Right now, we've had 9% of all COVID cases in the Brant region have happened this week, right? So that's something to keep in mind as well. There's also numerous options that aren't just masks. I know it's called the mandatory mask bylaw, but face shields and they're balaclava type pieces. There are custom made pieces people can utilize. Mask use actually becomes normalized in the communities where this has happened. And this actually helps with Councillor Gatward's point about not being able to wear it correctly. We could show folks how to wear it, but we have a reason to as it becomes a mandatory bylaw, and the communication increases based on that. And I also think there's an issue with fair play with our neighbors. And I don't just mean Brantford, although I believe they're going to pass it today, but I mean Waterloo, Guelph, Hamilton, which is likely to pass it later this week. I don't want to see the influx of people from phase 2 areas coming to shop here because we don't have masks, right? I think that's actually a health disaster waiting to happen. Just a little tally, we had a total of 76 pieces of correspondence that are on the official record. We have 24 against and 52 for. So the majority of people who sent in, it is contentious. There is a lot of debate both ways. And by the way, some of the against points I think are valid. There are some points that are about the logistics of this and other pieces. It's not just that. But again, we're surrounded by regions that are staying in phase 2. That causes me for concern. We have amazing talent here locally. We have 2 virologists and a medical doctor who wrote in to talk about why they're for this. I think that's an important piece to mention. And that we have the highest transmission rate per capita currently in Ontario. Right? That's a sobering piece here. And I think as we move to phase 2 or phase 3, not wanting to go back to phase 2 or phase 1, I think we should be proactive in terms of making a mandatory mask bylaw happen before the phase 3 piece happens. And we go from 11 cases to who knows how many. More cases are going to happen until we have a vaccine, but I think this is a proactive measure. So I'm fully supporting it. I thank everybody for all the letters they sent, and I hope majority of council supports it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, like Mark, I've written down what I wanted to say, but I'll start by saying I fully support this proposal. I looked to an old idiom which says an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or more than a pound of cure. A paper cloth mask literally weighs about an ounce, if that. But it's clear that many, many pounds of cure will be needed to address COVID-19 if it expands on us. And we shouldn't forget that prevention comes in a limited number of forms in the absence of vaccine. social distancing, regular hand washing, avoidance of large crowds, and wearing a mask. So wearing a mask is just one part of our response. And I understand and recognize that wearing a mask has little protective capacity for the mask wearer. And this, I saw a lot of comments in the emails and texts that we got that didn't get this point. It's actually to protect others from any possible infection that we, as the mask wearer, may have. The majority of us haven't been tested, and we won't be tested on a regular basis even at that point. And yet we might be asymptomatic carriers. So mask wearing is done for the common good. It's not done for our personal protection. It's a selfless act in the care of our fellow residents. So I want to reinforce a little bit of the context. I will when I get my picture back. Apologies. Apologies.
Councillor Bell, what do you think you're missing?
Oh, a lot. I'm coming. I've got it here. Yeah, I want to reinforce context. We're proposing to mandate mask wearing in indoor public spaces. This is a specific mandate. A lot of people in their commentary to us in emails and texts gave the impression that we were trying to mandate it in every situation possible. That is not the case. But for most of us, that means if we go shopping or we're going to a bank or we're going to another retail store, we're talking about wearing a mask for 10, maybe 15 minutes a day. A lot of the people that wrote to us were talking about the difficulties of wearing masks for hours on end. That is not the case. If we can get widespread use of masks, it's been shown that we can significantly limit the spread of the virus. And whilst many people are voluntarily wearing masks, like Joan mentioned just a few minutes ago, that's not enough. We need to get a bigger proportion of the population wearing masks to get the effect that is going to make a difference. And while I respect that many of our residents have done their research, they've read the papers, I'm actually going to put my faith in the expertise of our medical officer of health, the provincial medical officer of health, and many global and public health organizations who all recommend the wearing of a non-medical grade mask in indoor public settings. I don't want a second wave of the virus. One of our writers, one of the people that wrote to us, Russ Fisher, showed a couple of graphs of the cases versus time, and he showed Australia and he showed Israel. And if you look at that, they went through a peak a few months ago and they thought they'd cracked it. And where are they today? They're actually in a worse place than they were when they thought they cracked the problem. I don't want to be there. I want to avoid this situation both in Canada and especially here in Brant County. And as Mark remarked, it's not just one case that's active at the moment, which some of our correspondents actually said. We've actually got 11. We're actually in an uptick at the moment. We're actually going in the wrong direction, not in the right direction. So the virus is lurking in our midst, and widespread mask wearing will help reduce the spread of that virus transmission. So I'm going to support this motion for a mask mandate, both as a citizen, as a member of a vulnerable age group. I'm a senior. We're in that group that is at risk. I will vote for it as a councillor, and I'll vote for it as the chair of the Board of Health. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, through you. If I could just go back to the discussion I was having in regards to the end date of this and how it would be, as it's written now, we would have to be told by the medical officer of health that that they are now feeling that it's okay for the bylaw to cease. I would like to suggest that I feel that we as council should make the decision when this bylaw, if it passes, when it would end. So what I would suggest is if we were to have it as a, if we want to call it an expiry of our monthly council meetings, we put it on the agenda for the following meeting. It comes up, we vote on it. If we vote it, that's okay. Then we go another month. If we vote it down, then the bylaw as it would be if it passed would cease at that point in time. I just don't like the fact of somebody other than the council having the final say per se as to when we can stop this bylaw if it should pass. Now, that being said, I want it to be noted that I'm not against wearing masks. So I'm in support of the concept, but there's a few things in regards to this, how it's written, that I'm not really in favor of. Again, the first one was, I feel it's us as a council that should have the final say as to when it ends, and we can do so by putting it as a repeating agenda item on our council meetings as we go forward monthly. The second one that I have a problem with is, which will require parents of children 2 years and older to wear a mask. To me, that is going to be extremely difficult. We talk about the difficult times that we've been in for several months now, and now we're trying to put a little bit more pressure on parents to ensure that their 2-year-old children wear a mask. If we look at a lot of the surrounding municipalities and the bigger cities and stuff, they went with 5 years old. I would suggest that I would like to amend that to any children under 5. Be exempt for that. Again, it'll be difficult enough to have it on a 5-year-old, but a 2-year-old, I think that's going to be highly unlikely to be successful with doing that. A couple other things in here when it talks of page 57 in section 3 and 4, when it talks about people that would be excluded from this. I feel that there's a huge gap here, and the huge gap is that if I walk into a store, again, I want to note it here, I'm not opposed to wearing a mask, but if I walk into a store and I do not have a mask on, and the store owner comes up to me and says, excuse me, sir, we have a policy here as per the bylaw, we have something on the door that you're required to wear a mask. All I have to say is, I've got a condition that says I don't have to. It ends there. The merchant cannot ask me what the condition is. I don't have to divulge what that condition is. I can just simply say, I have a condition, I don't have to wear a mask. It ends right there. If you go a little bit further on that, with stage 3 opening up, and which means gyms and restaurants and stuff like that, a couple of the places that they're not required are gyms and restaurants. So again, I'm trying to understand, if we've got people going to the gyms and we got people going to the restaurants and they're not wearing masks, how is that going to work if they're, if they're not wearing them there? Who's to say that it's going? And I believe it would help, but who's to say it's going to conquer it if they're worn everywhere else? And as far as going into a store and saying, I don't have to wear a mask, I have a condition, I don't think it's fair to put that pressure on the merchants to have to police that for us. I'm not saying that it will, but it could put them into a very difficult situation if there was somebody come into the store and they, they're very cordial, very polite about it, ask them to wear a mask. That may end up in a scuffle or an argument or something like that. And I think I don't think it's fair to put the merchants in that position to have to police it in their own environments. Then the last one, when it talks about enforcement, to me, if we're going to enforce something, it needs to be strictly written as to, step 1, step 2, step 3. That's it. There's no, the way it's written in here, I just feel it's very vague. And again, it's going to put a lot of pressure on our bylaw officers, our OPP officers, whomever it is that's going to try and police this, because it's not written in black and white, so to speak. As far as the letters that we received, I must say that even if we take the growth that's been happening in the Paris area in the last few years, and it's coming, we got a lot of letters about that. I was blown away with the number of letters that we received on this, which means people want to be heard. And as Councillor Laferriere said, the vast majority of people are in favor of wearing masks. So again, a couple points I'd like to make. I would like us as council to determine the end date. We can do that by putting a repeating agenda item on our council agenda. I don't feel it's feasible to have it 2 years and under. I don't feel it's appropriate to put that level of pressure on store owners that if somebody walks into their store and not wearing a mask, it's just too easy for people to say, I've got a condition, I don't have to wear one. And the last thing I'll say, excuse me 1 second here. Pardon me, sorry about that. About the mask, we need to make sure that there is a supply of masks at a decent price for people to have. Because as it is right now, it's difficult to get masks. And all of a sudden, if this bylaw came in, that we might find ourselves in a situation where all of a sudden the price of masks go up. So it does talk in the report there that we would have masks available. I feel that if in fact we are going to initiate this bylaw as is or slightly amended, that we need to be able to supply masks to our constituents at no charge. I think that's all for now. If there's others that have anything to say, but those are my thoughts on this. Again, I'm in favor of something like this, but I am not in favor of how it is written now.
Any other comments? Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think I've seen this number of emails since the County of Brant and the City of Brantford were trying to reach a land transfer. And it brought out the best of a lot of people. And I have mixed feelings on this. I think if this had been initiated by the province 4 months ago or back in March when this started, I could fully support it. I'm not so sure this should all be on the onus of the municipalities. I totally agree with what Councillor Pierce is saying. Is I think there needs to be a look at some of this stuff where we have an end date on it. Mandatory masks for children under 5. I have some concerns on this. I don't have a problem wearing a mask. I have worn a mask, but I think I would rather see it. The individual store owners, if they have to sign in their own store saying you need to wear a mask, I don't have a problem with that. But when it's mandated by the municipality, I have some issues with it. So I will be voting no on this, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Chambers, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll begin by saying that I do wear a mask religiously everywhere I do go. When I go out into town and into public places, I do wear a mask. And I take the COVID-19 very seriously. I have a family member who's tested positive for the virus, so I don't want to be accused of not taking the virus seriously. I respect the medical officer of health's opinion. She is an expert, as medical officers of health are. She has a far more expertise than what I have, for sure. And I note that she does have the authority under Section 22 of the Health Protection and Promotion Act to issue the order. And if she did issue an order today, I would support it 100%. And I feel that it is the experts that should be making the decisions on the order, not the municipal politicians. I feel very unqualified in comparison to a medical officer of health, be making orders and mandates. She can do that if she feels that it is necessary, and perhaps she should, and I would support it. I do not support the bylaw as it is written, and I will be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Are there any other comments? Councillor Wheat.
Well, I'm not supporting it either. Where was this move from the Officer of Health 4 months ago when the numbers were high? Numbers are going down. Numbers don't lie. We're down under 200 for the last week. When we were up around 400, where was this move? Nowhere to be seen. So I'm not going to support it. I have the utmost confidence in our citizens to do the right thing, whatever they feel is right. Who am I to tell them what is right and what is wrong? I have had a test. How many other people have went and had a test? I went and had one. And I wear a mask when I go to the grocery store. I wear a mask in the hardware store. I wore a mask today at Telfer Place when I went to see my mother-in-law. But it isn't up to me to tell people that they have to do that. So I will be voting no.
Thank you, Councillor Wheat. Councillor Howes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm just in respectful response to some of the points that have been made. I think we didn't need to adopt a mask culture 3 months ago because for the most part, everybody stayed home, right? We didn't have hundreds of visitors coming to our community on weekends 3 months ago. But we do now. And that will increase as we become a stage 3 community and other larger centers remain a stage 2 community. People in larger urban centers are going to be desperate to get out and do more things, and this is where they're going to come. It's going to be good for business, but I think we have to approach it very, very cautiously, and I would certainly rather err on the side of caution with this one. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out that the majority of emails and phone calls I've received, and I don't know if Robert's found this out with his responses, but the majority that I received were people not in favor of mandatory masks. I just want to point that out. We weren't on social media asking people to, send in letters of support. So that's why some of them didn't find their way into our package tonight. But I just wanted to point that out. I will say, just because a majority supports a position doesn't mean they're in the right. But I will be voting the way the majority of the constituents have asked me to vote tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Are there any other comments? Councillor LaFerriere.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Okay. Before your amendment, can we have a first-time question from Councillor McAlpine, please?
Absolutely.
Or comment?
Well, I'm in favor of the motion, but I agree with Councillor Pierce that we should be making the decision in conjunction with the health unit, but I think we need to make that final decision. And an ongoing monthly amendment, I think, would be appropriate. When we look at what's happening in the States right now, they're at 65,000 people infected last month. And New York put in a bylaw for masks in April, and they now gone from the highest count down to the lowest count in the US. And I think that's something really important, that places that have put this bylaw into place, whether it's Israel and some other places, it has worked. And I think it's something we should be paying attention to. And again, it's something we're doing for other people rather than ourselves. So I think that's important.
Thank you, Councillor McAlpine. Councillor Gatward, you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I failed to mention in my remarks that I too had many phone calls and emails that weren't included in the council package, and they were all opposed to the mandatory bylaw for masks. I think a lot of people feel that we are taking away their freedom of choice. And as far as the US, that's a whole different ball game. We've got our borders closed, and I don't think we can compare Brant County to the US. I think our citizens have done very well, and I know that the Harris area is concerned about visitors coming to their community, and that's why they're pushing for masks. However, to penalize everyone in the county and make masks mandatory is unfair. And as Councillor Chambers said, we're not the experts. The medical officer of health is, and she should be making this order and defending her decision. And my question earlier was, how much are we going to be willing to spend to defend this if we pass it in court? — was never answered. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Councillor McAlpine.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You have a comment? Mr. Bradley, do you want to speak to the amount of money we would use to defend it in court if someone?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I can't answer that question. We've been, to be honest, we've been dealing with or enforcing provincial directives for 4 months right now. A lot of them are vague, a lot of them are complicated, and I don't think we anticipate being in court with any of them. So I would hope our focus on this will be education initially, and that's how we've taken our enforcement approach to all of the directives that were handed down over the course of the last 4 months. So I think if it became an enforcement challenge and looked like we were going to be investing or required to spend a lot, we would be coming to council and seeking directions.
Councillor Laferriere, you wanted to speak again?
Yes, I wanted to make an amendment, noting that we're not experts on almost anything that we vote on, but I'd like to make 2 amendments if possible, but lump them together as one. One is to remove mixed exemption and make a clear exemption for children 5 and under. And I'm a little confused about the other one I want to make. I don't know if it would make sense for the sake of the bylaw, instead of coming back every month, to just strike out the piece about it being at the request of the medical officer, that we would just have to come and vote, or do we? Okay, I see Councillor Pierce nodding his head no, so I'm trying to get his vote here. So what I'm going to say instead is make an amendment to have a monthly vote on whether or not to continue the mandatory mask bylaw if it so passes. That would be my amendment, seeking a seconder.
I'll get a seconder for that, please. Put it on the floor. Councillor Pierce will second it. It's on the floor. Councillor Pierce wants to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would second those to putting it to 5 years old. And the other one, if I could just put a friendly amendment to his amendment. I think that's what where you were going here, Councillor Ferrier. If we were to have a standing item on our monthly council meetings, whether it goes another month. Obviously, we would be in conjunction, like CAO said, they're in conversations pretty much weekly with the health folks, and we get a good feel from them how things are going. But I think if we had it as a standing item on our agenda to vote on it monthly, I think that would put us in a better place. As I say, it comes up, we discuss what Michael has found in his discussions. If we're still in a situation where we think we need it, we pass it again, it's good for another month, but we would control when it ends.
Point of information?
Councillor Ferrier?
My only concern with that, and I'm very open to that, but my only concern is that we're not in a regular monthly scheduled meeting yet. Like we're having meetings that are considered council meetings, sometimes more than monthly. So is there a way to make that friendly amendment stick properly so that we get the point of the monthly, as opposed to when we have a bi-weekly meeting, we're not adding it to every extra council meeting that we've been having because we're in a state of emergency? I don't know if that's a question to staff, maybe the clerk.
Yep. Heather? Or Michael? Heather?
It's probably just clearer if we just leave it as a standing item on our council agendas. I don't think we're in the situation we're gonna have too many more special ones, so it's probably just easier just to stick with the regular council meetings.
Okay. Well, that friendly amendment works for me then, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there anyone else? Councillor Chambers wants to speak to the amendment?
Yes, I would just caution the members with regard to the amendment. What you're doing is setting up a political determination rather than a science-based determination. You're going to be asking the politicians monthly whether they should continue the bylaw or not. And I maintain that the politicians, being us, are not qualified to make that decision without the expertise that would be required to make such a decision. The people that have the expertise, or the person that has the expertise, is a medical officer of health. It should be her call whether to impose a mandate and her call whether to release a mandate or not. If you set it up as a political decision monthly at a council meeting, you're really going against basing what we're doing on science and moving it strictly into the political realm, and that is very dangerous in my opinion. So I won't be supporting the amendment on that basis. And again, I encourage everyone to wear a mask. I support wearing masks, and I would support wholeheartedly medical health mandated the wearing of the mask, and I would support her 100% if she removed the mandate at an appropriate time. But be careful setting up political decisions that should be science-based.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to Councillor Chambers, that's exactly what I was speaking of, is that Michael will be having discussions with the medical officer of health, as he says, almost on a weekly basis now, at least a couple of times a month. So the conversations will go on, and they will say, yep, we're in a pretty good spot right now. I think we can back this off, or you know what, things are still trending the wrong way. It's probably best that we keep it going. I'm not saying for 1 minute that we make the decision on our own. Absolutely not, because I agree with what you're saying. What I am saying is that in conjunction with discussions with the medical officer of health, we as council will decide that, okay, you know what, those discussions are favorable, so we can make the decision to end it, not just on a whim to say, oh, I think we'll end it this month. No, that's not at all what I was talking about. I was talking about using the discussions with the medical officer of health, taking her advice, as you know, as that's part of the situation here as well, is the medical officer of health is telling people to wear a mask. We should be wearing a mask, and I'm not for a minute saying that we shouldn't, but all I'm simply saying is that we should be in the situation where we as a council can make the bylaw end when we want to, obviously with conjunction with the medical officer of health.
Thank you. Are there any others? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the children under 5 part of the amendment, and I'm wondering if we can vote on them as A and Amendment A and B, because I don't agree with the monthly assessment as been described, because I don't think it's us that should be doing it, as Councillor Chambers mentioned. So that was one item in the bylaw, the children, that I did not agree with. So I would like to vote for that, but against the other item. That's why I'm asking for the 2 items to be voted on separately for the amendment.
Councillor Ferrier, how do you feel about that?
I'd rather just move to the vote if possible.
Move to the vote? I mean, it's not something we have to decide today. There is always the option of clarification and deferring this to another time. There's no timeline on this. It would have been nice to have had something in place with the city of Brantford the same night, just so it didn't get muddled in the morning when the newspapers come out. But why
don't we see if it passes as is? We can always make other amendments, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
You mean the amendment, Mark, right?
Yeah. Yep, I mean the amendment.
Still seconded by Councillor Pierce? Yeah? Okay, we'll call the vote on the amended.
What, Mr. Mayor, can you
Councillor
read it,
Miller.
please? Can we get it, Brant? What are we voting on?
Clerk, Heather, could you read it, please?
Under 5.
That folks 5 and under be exempt from wearing
Okay.
masks.
So then the motion is that the recommendation and proposed bylaw with respect to face coverings in enclosed public places be amended to change the exemption for children to be a child who is the age of 5 years old or under, and to amend the report so that council would consider at each regular council meeting whether or not the bylaw would continue in effect for the next period.
Yep.
Thank you. Is everyone clear before we call the vote? All those in favor? Oh, Councillor Chambers? Oh, you're okay. Councillor Chambers?
Yes, I need I need clarification, because how that was read makes it sound like the bylaw expires unless it is continued by vote. Is that correct? So before our next council meeting, the bylaw would expire and then we have to reinitiate it. That's the way the recommendation or the resolution sounds to me. So it will expire unless we continue it, which is different than continuing it unless we
Rescind it.
Michael, can you clarify that, please?
Well, I also need clarification from council. So the way the current resolution is written, it would be directing me to confer with the medical officer of health. And if the medical officer of health said, you don't need this bylaw in place anymore, then staff would bring forward a bylaw to rescind this bylaw at its next available time. But I think what Councillor Chambers just indicated, would it be council's preference that the bylaw expire after a month unless extended, which would require a new bylaw to be put in front of council prior to the expiry? Or is it council's, just for clarification, does council just want it as a standing item, this to be a bylaw that's put in place with no expiry on it, but that a item for consideration be added monthly to the agenda to potentially consider rescinding the bylaw? I think that's what is the clarification that's required.
Since it was Councillor Pierce's friendly amendment, I'd defer to him.
Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The way I envisioned it was in fact that the bylaw would in fact end and we would have to approve it again at the next meeting.
Point of information?
Councillor Ferrier?
Would that then allow for an opportunity naturally, and this is to the clerk and Michael, would that, through you, Mr. Mayor, would that then allow a natural point to amend if we decide to continue it, or would that create some issues? Because I do see, if this is to happen, we're a month in, I don't think that the fervor about this is gonna be as high as it is right now. I think the anticipation of the thing is worse than the thing. And I do think there are opportunities to amend, and I've seen other municipalities make amendments to either back off or make something make more logistical sense as it's on the ground, as it's being seen. So to me, that'd be the ideal. But does this preclude the ability to amend it because we'd have to vote on it every time, or would that make it easier to amend it month by month in order to tweak it as needed?
Councillor Howes wants to speak to it first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is getting a little complicated at this stage, and I was just wondering if the words to be reviewed by council on a monthly basis might simplify it.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Howes there, that would suggest that there's no end date. What I'm talking about is it automatically disappears, in essence, unless we extend it at our next meeting.
Councillor Wheat?
Well, COVID-19 is not going to go away. It's just like F1N1 flu has not gone away. AIDS has not gone away. Just because there's a vaccine, not everyone is going to take that vaccine. So the disease will continue to exist. So when does this really end? It really doesn't. It doesn't end. COVID-19 is going to be here for a long, long, long time.
Councillor Wheat. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Wheat. So I'm trying to understand, with that comment, are you suggesting that we have a bylaw for masks for a long, long, long time?
That's correct, because it isn't going to go away. This disease is now going to be with us. It's just like any ordinary flu is with us. Pneumonia is with us. F1N1 is with us. There's many different diseases that are with us, and they're with us forever. COVID-19 will be one of them. It's not going to disappear.
So we will wear masks forever.
Well, I'm just pointing that out, John. What you interpret it however you want.
Point of order. We're looking for the amendment clarification.
It's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear off the face of the earth. Forget it.
Thank you, Councillor Wheat. Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Speaking, I think, to part of the amendment, whatever we agree, it has got to have a connection to advice and guidance from the medical officer of health.
Yep.
So I don't believe we're, as Councillor Chambers is quite right in saying, we're not the experts in this subject. But we do have an expert that we can call on, an expert that has recommended that we take the steps that we're discussing now. So any decision we make should be done with her blessing.
So in saying that, Councillor Bell, are you still in support? Do you still feel that she has given us direction to move ahead with this? Councillor Bell?
Yeah, I believe she has. I'm just reading the words. She said, I support the enactment of a bylaw requiring masks and face coverings. So yes. So I mean, we are working forward on the basis that she has given us that endorsement. If she hadn't given us that endorsement, I don't think we'd be having this conversation.
Councillor Chambers? Councillor Chambers, yeah.
I guess that begs, yes, I guess that begs the question, and as to why she does not, if she feels that it is necessary and is recommending that we do it, why does she not just make the order as the act permits her to do?
I think, Councillor Chambers, you just have to, I think we have to ask Michael, because he's been involved in the discussions leading up to this. I have not been.
Mr. Bradley?
Thank you, Worship. So, I mean, I can't speak for her. I believe we've discussed this at the Unified EOC, noting that there are a few options to do this. It's my recollection that the local medical officer of health felt that the order, the class order under section, bear with me, 22 of the, pardon me if you can just bear with me. What is it? Pardon me, just bear with me, Your Worship. So that would be a class order under section 22 of the Health Protection and Promotion Act, which would be her method to do this. It has weakness and limitations. I don't recall her elaborating on those weaknesses and limitations, but it is my understanding that most chief medical officers of health or local medical officers of health in the province are recommending that bylaws be implemented. And that's why that seems to be the mechanism that's being followed under most municipalities. Now, I would note that a couple of jurisdictions, health unit jurisdictions, have passed those section 22 orders, and then a couple of them have passed both section 22 orders by the medical officers of health, and then the municipality has subsequently or in conjunction passed a bylaw. So it seems to be, again, if we've learned anything through this emergency process, I think our legislative system in the background will need some updating when this is over, but that's my best answer to that question. Also, the clerk and I have conferred about the question of the bylaw being reviewed monthly. I think her consensus, and I would agree with that, is that the bylaw then should have an end date on it. That end date should be consistent with the next council meeting. And then you would also provide us with direction to put the bylaw back on upcoming council agendas with advice and seek advice for those agendas from the medical officer of health. At that point, so that would be an automatic, the bylaw would be automatically moved onto the agenda. At that point, council, when it considered bylaws, would then be in a position based on the medical officer of advice to remove that bylaw. And then the bylaw would cease to exist. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit complicated.
Does it make sense to anyone want to comment? I know that we've taken a long time dealing with this. It's the first major issue that's come up since I've been the mayor that has been so passionate. And I've received hundreds of calls, emails, and letters from both sides. And they're all very passionate. And when I'm speaking to them all on the phone, or email or whatever. I understand exactly where all of them are coming from. So I'm very torn on this. I know what my heart says to do, and I know what, I know the other side too. So it's very interesting the way this is playing out. I've been so sure both ways how I was going to vote tonight. I knew I wasn't going to support it, and then I knew I was going to support it. Now I haven't got a clue, because all the things I'm hearing tonight make sense to me. And the only thing that I can tell you that I've observed before we vote, if I could, I haven't said anything so far. The only thing that I've noticed that I can tell you is the truth, is that everyone who doesn't want to wear a mask and has written to me or emailed me always attach it to something else. They're also not going to put up sneeze guards. They don't wear their seat belts. They would call me a Nazi. They would say that I'm being invasive. They would say I'm being like a dictator. They never just said they didn't want to wear masks. They also weren't going to do a whole lot of other things. They accused me of not allowing them to worship. And in my world, when you close your eyes and you talk to God, you're worshiping. I didn't realize that having the mayor of a municipality of a county of Brant could stop them from worshiping. I don't understand that one little bit. And I've also noticed that the people that have asked me to please make sure or try to make sure that everyone's wearing masks because we're afraid have always been kind and to the point. It didn't connect it to anything else. No one threatened to shop somewhere else if I didn't do it. No one told me, they weren't going to support local business if I didn't do it. They didn't connect it to anything as an ultimatum. They just said, please vote to have everyone wear masks. So I do have that in my mind as the types of people that, and how they spoke to me and how they treated me as the mayor. And I can only tell you that I didn't deserve most of it, and I don't want to wear a lot of it, and I only get one vote. So with that all being said, we will call the vote on the amendment if everyone's happy with that. Are we sure what we're voting on, and are we ready to vote?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like a recorded vote, please.
Well, what if someone hasn't got pants on, Joan? Can we just do it another way? We can't stand up.
It's just for the clerk to record it for the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
I'm just not sure Mr. Coleman's got pants on there, and I don't want him to stand up. What we'll do is we'll call for a recorded vote, and Heather will call everyone's name. Heather?
Okay, Mayor Bailey?
But Mayor, can we just repeat the amendment that we're now voting on?
Yeah, I can do that. So the amendment is that the bylaw be amended to change the exemption for children to exempt all children who are the age of 5 years or under, and also to amend the bylaw to include a termination clause as of the date of the next regular council meeting, with the bylaw to be placed back on the agenda of that meeting with advice sought from the medical officer of health.
Everyone's clear? Heather,
Okay.
did you call the vote?
Yeah, Councillor Gatward asked for the motion, so I'll ask Councillor Gatward.
Can't hear you, Joan.
So, sorry, no.
And just to clarify, we're voting on just on the amendment at this point. Okay, Councillor Coleman?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
I'm voting in favor of the two amendments.
Okay, Councillor Chambers?
You're on mute.
No.
Okay, Councillor Pierce?
Yes.
Councillor Bell?
Yes.
Councillor Howes?
Yes.
Councillor LaFerriere?
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine?
Yes.
Councillor Wheat?
No.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Okay, the motion is carried for the amendment.
Okay. We need a second vote. Heather?
Yeah, we need to vote on the motion as amended.
Ready? Everyone's clear on what they're voting for?
I'd like to ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote again. Any other comments before we vote? Seeing none. Heather, call the vote, please.
And that Councilor Ferrier asked for that one, I believe. Okay, I'll start with you then, Councilor Ferrier.
Yes.
Councilor McAlpine,
Yes.
Councilor Wheat,
No.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Councilor Gatward,
No.
Councilor Coleman,
No.
Councilor Miller,
No.
Councilor Chambers,
No.
Councilor Pierce,
Yes.
Councilor Bell,
Yes.
Councilor House,
Yes.
the motion is carried 6-5.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the discussion. I'm sorry that the vote went this way, only because I think we have some troubles that are going to be cropping up now. But we had to take the vote. We had to make a decision. You always hope your decisions are right, and I hope that we've done the right thing, and we'll carry on. So thank you all for the input and the conversation and the comments. 7G. Moving on, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Pierce, that the recommendation RPT-2087 be received for information.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the report? Councillor Bell? Are you leaning on your buzzer or do you have a question? You're not, you're leaning on your buzzer. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor?
I have, sorry.
Okay.
Did you recognize me?
I certainly did.
Thank you. I had a question with respect to the very last page, which is the budget schedule. In the past, as some of the counselors that have been at the table for a few years would remember, we had presentations from agencies such as the John Noble Home, the Social Services Department, whom we give a lot of our tax dollars to, which is operated jointly between the city and the county. We give money to the conservation authorities. And we used to have presentations from those agencies to council at budget time. And then unfortunately it was dropped. And we are supposed to be transparent and accountable to the taxpayers. And we don't get an overview of what is in those budgets and what we are approving as a levy against residents of the county of Brant. So I am proposing, Mr. Mayor, that we bring back those presentations as a budget meeting to hear from those agencies, especially in the times that we're having now, because everyone, I'm sure, is struggling with their budgets. And we have a request on our agenda tonight from the housing department that just showed up out of the blue for council to look at. And had we have known that this was in the works, or that they plan to do this year or next year, you know, we might have been able to better budget for that affordable housing. So that's what I'm requesting on the last page, that somewhere in the schedule of meetings that we have a meeting with the agencies so they can present their budgets to council.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you.
Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, to Councillor Gatward, if you look on page 76 of the package, number 3 there, when it talks about external agencies would be requested to provide budget proposals with a high level detail and would not be requested to make presentations. Then it goes on to say, council at its discretion after reviewing the initial draft budget would have the opportunity to request either a follow-up information from the external agencies or could ask the external agencies to come in with their presentations. I think that's the way to go, because if we're unclear about something, then we can have them come in. I don't think it's necessary to have them all come in right off the hop. So I like the way it's noted there in number 3 on page 76. It gives the both alternatives there.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Gatwood's point, one, we do have a problem with the Brant Health Unit. Their budgeting cycle is out of sync with ours. So we typically get presented with what the budget is, and we have very little, if any, ability to influence it. And the mayor and I, who sit on that board, we sit there as county appointees. We're not there to represent the county. So we can't influence the decision to fit our budget cycle, as even though we might wish we could. So while I'm on, if I may, there was a question I was going to ask of Michael, and the idea of bringing forward a status quo budget, I think, is a smart way of going about things. I like the process that you're proposing. But I had a question about some of the things that we consciously pushed back in 2020 to 2021. For example, the renovation of Cedar Street, we pushed back. Does that fit in the status quo, or does it have to restart the process again?
Mr. Bradley?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, the renovation of Cedar Street would be a capital item, and we would bring forward a capital budget based on the current capital plan. And so anything that got bumped out of 2021, or 2020 because of COVID, is probably just going to push the capital plan linearly into the future. So I think it would definitely be coming forward. It's not an operating budget item, it's a capital item. So the capital plan would continue to be brought forward. The capital budget, the size of the capital budget would be dictated by the construction price index. So that would, may allow a bigger or smaller scope of the capital plan for 2021. But so in answer to your question, it's a capital item. The capital plan would continue to be brought forward according to its timeline. So.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bell. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pierce's comment about my request. The high level information that we get from these agencies in the budget, I believe, is just, here's what their budget is, here's what their percentage increase is or decrease, or status quo, same dollar request budget is. We don't get any details. And that's what I'm looking for, Mr. Mayor. We don't even get the social services minutes. I believe Councillor Miller requested them to be circulated back a number of months or last year. I guess we could go on the city website and find them, but I prefer to have them sent to me so I can read them when they come in. And then you find out what's happening with all our tax dollars. I just don't like the new abbreviated high level numbers that we get, and we don't know what is happening. So that's why I'm requesting presentations. In the past, as far as the health unit's concerned, Dr. Tober would give us an overview of what's happening at the health unit. And I found it very interesting. Whether their fiscal schedule meets with ours, at least we got information and we knew what the health unit was concentrating on. as it is now, we don't get anything, and we don't know, other than I suppose we can look up the board minutes. Anyway, those are my comments, and I still would like to see that. I don't know if other councillors aren't interested, but I am, and I think it's important that we know what they're spending dollars on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Maybe we could make that request moving forward after the vote tonight. I mean, once you've asked people to do something, we can maybe talk about that and bring it to council at another time. I think the vote in front of us is very clear. Any other questions on the vote the way it's written? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Moving on to number 9, please. It is communications. Oh, we had no information reports. Moving on to number 9, communications. The City of Brantford cost sharing agreement for new affordable housing at 170 Trillium Way in Paris. Councillor Howes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given that we have not added any affordable housing units in our community in the last 20 years, I've drafted a resolution that I'd like to read for this, and then I'm looking for a seconder, and then we can talk about it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Howes.
It reads that the County of Brant supports in principle the creation of a new municipal affordable housing building at 170 Trillium Way. And further, that the County of Brant indicates its willingness to make a capital contribution for the municipal portion of this project that is at minimum equal to the current cost sharing formula between the city and the county for housing services, pending the completion and receipt of the feasibility study, which will confirm in detail the scope, costs, and timeline of this project. And that staff be directed to develop options for financing this project for council's future consideration.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. I have a seconder and Councillor Bell. Oh, okay. Sorry, John.
It's all right.
Sorry, John Wheat. I got John Bell. Any other conversation to that? That's a wonderful, wonderful brought that to us tonight. Councillor Wheat.
Further to that, I support of it, but not just necessarily specific address, county-wide.
Councillor LaFerriere.
You could end up, there's property in St. George.
Yeah, but just if I can speak to that through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wheat, they're taking it on a case-by-case basis at this time, and I think it's prudent to do so as well, not to exclude other potential county builds. I think actually this could help us develop a capacity to do more of them. But this is coming about because the City of Brantford is asking for some sort of commitment in principle so that they can move forward on a planning stage, and then we can join them. And I think Councillor Howe's motion here makes a lot of sense to do so in a respectful but cautious way.
Councillor Howes?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just in response to Councillor Wheat, and I appreciate the support of it. And I agree. I hope that this is one ingredient as part of a broader strategy throughout our county.
Councillor Gatward first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think this project is important on Trillium Way. It's been on the books a long time to have expansion at that area, but so has the St. George Russell Heights site. And I was under the understanding that the board of directors at Russell Heights were going to move forward with their own housing project independently. Is that still in the works? Do we know that? Yes or no? And if not,
correct.
You know that, Councillor Wheat.
That is to Councillor Gatward, that is incorrect. At this point in time, Board of Directors of Russell Heights are not
You're not moving forward? You cut out.
In time, no.
I'm not moving forward at this time. They've changed their mindset.
Clear at this point in time, the answer is no.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think this is important, wherever the housing goes, Mr. Mayor. We only have $43,000 in our reserve fund. But hopefully, coming up in our new budget, we can put some away in our capital reserves. This was suggested before you came, Mr. Mayor, by the housing manager, Mary Ellen. And she suggested that the county start doing this. And so we've got a bit in there, but we have a huge waiting list, as everyone knows, that's on social services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gatwood. Councillor Ferrier.
Yeah, just 2 points. That was suggested many moons ago, but it was actually a resolution we did as this council last year to create that reserve. We had a really good discussion about it then. One of the things I want to note is that currently the only 2 properties within the region, the shared housing region, and I'm just saying this as somebody who sits on social services and housing, are the only 2 that are ready, that are shovel ready or potentially shovel ready at this stage. It's Trillium Way and one in the north end of Brantford. So we've seen a pattern in the past of the county potential builds getting deferred. There seems to be some momentum this time to actually have a county build jump the queue, or not even jump the queue, just be in the queue and be properly placed in the queue and not like pushed back in the queue. So that's very potentially very exciting. So just wanted to give that context.
Any other questions or discussions, comments? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, to Councillor Ferrier, I don't think we're jumping any queue on this one. And I hope we support this, and I'd like to see a strong resolution from us, because sometimes you got to strike while the iron's hot, and the stars are aligning to actually get something done in the county for the first time in a long, long time. So I'm definitely supporting the resolution, and thank you to Councillor House for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Miller, for that. Okay, everyone's clear on the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you, Councillor House. Number B, Paris Agricultural Society. Request for some funding. What does council want to do with this? Councillor Wheat?
Well, I'm just waiting to, I didn't have my hand up, so, but it's,
okay.
I was in support of giving the Agricultural Society their back at budget time. At times. And
Councillor Ferrier?
I just want to clarify, are they asking for funding or are they asking for support for funding, or both?
Additional funding, as discussed during the grants program. So I don't think they took the money when we offered it to them in the grants program.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that. So yeah, thank you.
I just don't want us to forget about them. So what do you want to do? Just receive it as information? Councillor Gatwood?
The very last line, they're asking for us to reach out to our local MPP, Wilbooma, in support of our agriculture society. So I'm not sure why they didn't write a letter directly to him, but we could certainly refer this letter to him and receive it for information.
Yeah, seeking a seconder just to receive and to take it to Wilbooma. Pierce, Councillor Pierce. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 9C, please. Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chambers that correspondence from the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks regarding consultations on the environmental assessment process modernization be received as information and referred to staff for comment.
Any questions? Call the vote to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 9E, please. Councillor Gatward.
Sorry, I think you mean D.
Do I mean D? I do mean D. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No worries. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bell that correspondence from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing on the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act 2020 be received as information.
Thank you. Make a motion to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Gatward, you can't possibly be opposed to receive it. Thank you. 9E. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Pierce, that the letter from the Ministry of Transportation regarding the allocation of $13,368 for enhanced cleaning for our transportation programs and public transit systems be approved, or be received, sorry.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All those in favor to receive? Thank you. Opposed? Number 10, questions? Councillor Miller, is this where you want to step in?
Well, actually, it was going to be under item 12, other business, but I can if you wish.
Yeah, okay, why don't you do that now? You've got 3, so.
Okay. All right, thank you. First one actually is, might be to you, Mr. Mayor. Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, I found out Friday, they're looking for letters of support from their members regarding a $1 billion plan to proceed with the next stage of SWIFT. Now, we haven't done the first stage of SWIFT, but RFPs have gone out. They'll be closing for the County of Brant in October. And when all said and done, after this $5 million injection, give or take some money, we should take about 22% of the households and businesses that are not on high speed and get on up to high speed. So that, if you do the math, that still leaves 78%, and that's very similar for a lot of the rest of southwestern Ontario, at least the rural areas. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if you have seen that resolution. I understand some of the members have passed it, and they were hoping that we could pass it prior to them meeting with some of the provincial ministers at AMO in August.
I have seen it. I don't have it in front of me. Maybe we can put it on the next agenda.
Okay, and if I could ask, because I did talk to Heather before, but I didn't want to give her too hard a time because I knew she was busy with this face mask covering thing. But if she's seen it, or can we get it on for the next county agenda or council agenda?
Heather? Heather? Where's Heather?
Sorry, are you asking me for something, Mayor Bailey?
No, we're asking. He was asking whether you've seen the. Councilor Miller, could you ask her, please?
Yeah.
I emailed you earlier there, Heather, about the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus motion of support, but I didn't want to give you too hard a time because I knew you're busy with tonight's meeting. So
Yeah, I found the contact. I will touch base with her for the August meeting, which is still before AMO.
okay, yeah, so we would have to pass it hopefully at the start at our next council meeting, whenever that would be, which according to looks like might be start of August. Okay, I'll leave that alone. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Second question is regarding gypsy moths, tent caterpillars, and I thank Michael for getting information out to the public and putting it on the website and the Facebook page. I just to everybody listening, when you're driving around the county, just have a look at all the dead trees. Okay, you'll see a lot of leafless trees out there. I know the ashes, obviously, we know why they're dying. I don't think the drought has helped. And I think that from talking to a lot of people, from my own observations, the gypsy moths seem to be extremely bad this year. I know one resident out here in Ward 4, they had their trees stripped within a day. Well, actually, two people I've talked to experienced the same thing, and they live a few miles apart. So, first question, maybe through you, Mr. Mayor, to Michael. Does the county ever spray for these things? First question.
Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I'm not sure, certainly not in my experience, has the county ever led a treatment program. There was a big gypsy moth infestation in this area in 2008. I was quite involved with it because I was at the GRCA at the time and I looked after that kind of thing. So the infestation is kind of to a level now where the county may have to get involved because it's hard to control it on a property by property basis. It really does need to be controlled on a larger scale basis. Gypsy moth is controlled through usually through aerial treatments. So helicopters drop and it's a biological product that's dropped into the tree. It's called Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a living bacteria. It's found naturally in the soil, and it kills the caterpillars. Basically, they eat the bacteria and it kills them. So we've got a long time before we need to do that. That's a treatment that happens in May. That's when the early feeding of the initial hatch of the caterpillars. It's the best time to create control for it. So what we're going to do, because we do have, the infestation is bad in some parts of the county. I've been looking at 2 or 3 infestations, one in Glen Morris, one near my house, and one at around where my dad lives by the airport. So there are patches of quite severe infestation. So we're planning to do an egg mass count once the eggs have been laid. That'll give us an idea of what next year's infestation would look like. And then we'll be coming to council with some options, and one could be a county-led aerial treatment for next year's population. Because really for us, there's a cost to that, but a lot of those trees on the roadsides, if they die, we'll have to take them down anyways, and the cost to do that much higher than the treatment. And then there's of course the ecological value of protecting the forests. But just one thing, that a lot of the trees that have been stripped by gypsy moth, they will leaf back out. Most of them are flushing a second set of leaves now. The problem is they can't do that successive year after year. So there's only so many infestations that a healthy tree can take before it eventually becomes a dead tree. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I appreciate the input, and I Michael, kudos to you. I know you know more about this than your average person out there. But I do want council to be aware, if you're not, about how bad this problem is. And yeah, we got to start thinking about next year, because as you've already said, we passed the optimal time for spraying. And maybe we partner with the city, maybe we partner with the GRCA, maybe we partner with others when we do look at that spray program. And I'm hoping we get more information too about why it's so bad. Is it worse in 2008? I don't know. And I don't know if those gypsy moths liked the ash trees. That's why we're seeing more on the other trees. I don't know, but I'm looking for more information. So, okay, thank you for that, Michael. And then the final question, Robert and I had this from one of our residents, but the fellow has got, I guess he lives in a more rural area, and he's bringing in brush, and every time he brings it to the dump, I don't want to say dump, the landfill, they charge him $10 a load. And I asked Matt about it, Matt DeHaan. He says, actually, I discussed this. I know we will pick up, leaves and such in the built up areas twice a year. And I'm just wondering, is maybe to Rob Walton, I guess, would be the best one to ask, maybe not, or maybe Michael, but the brush itself, is there a cost to deal with it? In other words, somebody brings it in, do we got to pay somebody to ship it out, or how do we deal with brush? And is there a way maybe to, I don't know, I was just trying to level the playing field. Is there any way we could give that some thought?
Mr. Walton?
Through the mayor to Councillor Miller, we do have to bring in a tub grinder to deal with the brush a few times a year, depending on how much we get in there. So we do have a cost to deal with that. Certainly, as we look towards next year's programs, we can have a look at what that is and as part of the 2021 budget.
Okay. Again, I brought it up because I don't know if other council members have dealt with similar issues, but it did seem a little unfair that we pick it up twice for certain people, but other people we're going to ding them $10 every time they bring in a load. And to be fair, yeah, I mean, he could be burning it, right? And that just annoys a lot of people too. But I'll follow up with you, maybe Rob, later on, and we can maybe discuss some options.
Thank you.
Anything else? Moving on to resolutions, there aren't any. New business, other business, we had Councillor Bell for Cobblestone. No, who had Cobblestone? Councillor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wondered if we could get an update on the Cobblestone Common there. It seems that the work was all gung-ho right off the bat, and then it seemed to lapse for a few weeks and appeared that nothing was being done. I happened to be by there today and see that they do have some studs up on the wall, but I'm curious, like, did we run into some issues, or what's been the delay that there really hasn't been much work done there in the last few weeks or so?
Which member of staff wants to speak to that? Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know whether Rob's able to answer that or not. We may have to get that answer back. Rob, were you able to look into that?
Through the mayor to Councillor Pierce. So we're talking about the wall by Two Rivers downtown.
Correct.
Okay, so yes, I do have an answer for that. So we did actually run into a problem. There's a structure underneath that holds that up. And there were some issues that we found after they got working on it, which now have been, the solution has been resolved, and I understand that work will commence again tomorrow. And fortunately, the fix is not huge, but it was something that needed to be addressed now before we ran into problems later.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. And just with that in mind, is there a high price tag to this fix?
Not specifically. It's not. I don't know the exact cost, but it's not huge. In fact, we're waiting still on some costs for doing a little bit of repair to this beam that's down there and sandblasting it and recoating it. So, but I don't anticipate that to be a huge cost, and something that clearly needs to be done now.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. Joan, you wanted to speak to the service?
Customer service offices. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was happy when I heard that we had reopened the Paris and Burford customer service offices. Now that we're moving into stage 3, I expect we should be opening the Oakland and St. George customer service offices, especially since taxes are due at the end of this month. So that we can better serve our residents who like to pay their taxes in person to someone. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to whoever can answer the question, Robin isn't here tonight. Will they be opening up next week, since Friday is kind of late in the week to do it?
Michael, who's going to speak to Councillor?
Yeah, Your Worship, I can speak to that. And so we haven't opened those offices because they were attached to community centers, and there was awkwardness about opening an office that was attached to a community center, given the restrictions around community center openings. So that was the first reason. The second reason is, as we went into phase 2, we wanted to really just take a phased approach to that, and so we opened the high traffic offices first, where we had regular staff already reporting. So phase 3 was just announced yesterday. The regulations just came out this morning, and so we're reviewing those. Our EOC will be meeting tomorrow on Wednesday, and we will likely be discussing what our next reopenings are. There's quite a number of things that we're going to have to address, including community centers and those 2 offices. So like I outlined in an earlier report to council, if we can open these facilities without substantive cost increases, then we will do so. However, if there is a significant cost increase to open those facilities and meet the requirements for social distancing, et cetera, based on the continually updating regulations from the province, then we would come back to council with that. So I can't answer the question whether we'll be opening them next week. I think we will open them as expeditiously as possible, and with an understanding that our primary role as the EOC is to make sure that our residents and employees are safe. So, but you'll see more information on what our phase 3 reopenings are going to be over the coming couple days, and you may be also seeing some further council recommendations if those reopenings involve significant cost increases. Hopefully that answers the questions, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Bradley, for that answer. I would mention, I'm not sure about the St. George office, but the Oakland office does have a separate door, and the community center doors remain locked. So there's no issue with people getting into the community centers. The beam above the service counter could easily attach a plexiglass, piece of plexiglass to separate the staff from the customers that want to pay their taxes. I guess, like you say, it's just a matter of how it's going to roll out. And I was at the St. George customer service office at one point, but I believe you have to go through some of the community center. I'm just not sure. I'm sure the St. George councilors know how that works, but the Oakland office would be really simple. And I did have a resident who had trouble with her tax payment last February, getting lost because she went to St. George to pay it and they were closed. So she went to Linden Post Office, mailed it from there, and we never got it. So thank you for your response, Michael, and I look forward to those offices opening soon.
Thank you, Councillor Gutward. Moving on to
I can answer it, David.
Councillor Wheat.
As far as St. George is concerned, I've worked with Christine Staley, our tax collector. There's a mail drop right outside the door. It's picked up daily, and their receipt is mailed back to them. And I've had half a dozen customers already do that in St. George.
Thank you, Councillor Wheat.
Working.
We're moving on to item 13 on the agenda. I'd like to call on Councillor Coleman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving myself, second to Councillor Wheat, that we go in camera on a verbal update, a litigation matter affecting a municipality.
Everyone's clear. Call the vote. All those in favor to go in camera?
Noting that bylaw 72-20 for the wearing of face covering is going to be as amended.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second reading, please, Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Howes, that bylaws 69-20 to 76-20 be read a second time, and all preambles and clauses be approved. Once again, bylaw 72-20 as amended.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the second reading? Thank you. Councillor Pierce, the third reading, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Howes, that bylaws numbers 69-20 to 76-20 be read a third time, passed, sealed, and signed, noting 72-20 is as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Pierce. All those in favor? Third reading? Thank you. The next meeting is scheduled for August the 4th, a special council meeting to deal with planning applications. the same way as we've done it tonight? Seeing that as the end of our agenda, motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, before we do,
Yes.
if I could, now that we're moving into stage 3, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering if the discussion could be had about potentially an in-person meeting. Just throwing it out there.
Well, I know the clerk and all the techie people around here are doing all they can do all day long. So Heather, I don't know if you want to comment on that yet?
Mr. Mayor, it's Michael. Yeah, certainly. And actually, the clerk and I have had a fairly significant discussion in the last 8 hours about this. She's meeting with the IT group tomorrow morning. And so we actually are optimistic we can move to into an in-person meeting. Caution that likely we will not be able to have an in-person meeting in the current council chambers because it does not have the square footage to allow council and even the clerk and I. So we would probably be looking towards a larger facility for those meetings. And we still have to resolve how to deal with members of the public because even our larger facilities have square footage issues. Even 50 people are allowed. There's a square footage limitation to keep the social distancing. So we would hope to have some information out to council. We'll be discussing it with the mayor and out to council, but we are eager to get back to in-person meetings. These are a lot of work for us, and I think there's nothing like having face-to-face conversations. So
leave it in your capable hands. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Heather.
Clerk just has an addition.
The only other thing is that for the August 4th meeting, because we're doing planning applications, I'd also have to see what we put out in terms of the notice for that, because we may have already committed to how we do this.
So it is what everyone wants as soon as possible. And we'll just try to make it happen. I think we're pretty close. Is there anything else for the betterment of the county? Councillor Wheat.
Yes, I hope that being it's a planning meeting on August 4th, I hope that Roswell Cement is on the agenda. That is a local company that wants to expand and stay within the county of Brant, and we need to get that approved.
I hope you're right, Councillor Wheat.
Well, I will, if it's not, I will go through the roof. You'll meet the real John Wheat, David.
I've met him twice. It's not nice. We will try to get that back on the agenda. Any other?
Move to adjourn.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Pierce, we are adjourned.
Good night, all.
Good night, everyone.